You're listening to The Jake Asman Show on the SportsMap Radio Network.
Presented by Rocket Mortgage.
Live from the O'Reilly Auto Parts Studios, here's Jake Asman.
We just told you in the last segment some of the celebrities that are going to be at UFC 246. The former president, Donald J. Trump, will be there. Justin Bieber, Megan Fox, Kourtney Kardashian, Odell Beckham, Dave Chappelle, Kevin Durant. It's going to be a spectacle. It always is when Conor McGregor fights, especially now when you have a trilogy fight between Conor McGregor and Dustin Poirier. For more on this fight, the entire card, and so much more, we go out to our progressive guest line. Right now, we're bringing a senior reporter at MMA Junkie and Rolling Stone, Mike Bohn. Mike, appreciate the time this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Big week.
Huge week. So, you look at this fight, Mike, obviously Poirier won the last time these guys fought in January. McGregor won the first matchup way back in January of 2014. From Conor's standpoint, let's start with him. What adjustments do you think he makes from what happened in January to this fight on Saturday?
Of course, I think he just tries to be more prepared for the whole game. Of course, the leg kicks were a huge element of that second fight. It's what set up Dustin Poirier's ability to connect with the strikes that ultimately knocked out Conor McGregor. So I think Conor just needs to be a little bit more, on top of all the offensive elements that are coming his way. I think he needs to fight with a striking style that's less heavy on the front foot, and just use that movement that became, such a famous part of his game on his rise up to the top. And it's just a question of, is he going to overcorrect towards those leg kicks and maybe focus too much on them, where it leaves a big opening for Dustin Poirier to implement, whether it's a more grappling heavy attack or, go to the punches a little more. So it's definitely a very fine balance for Conor McGregor here. And I think that's why he has more to overcome in this fight. And it would be more impressive to me if he was able to win, just because I think it's a very tricky thing for him from a game planning standpoint. Dustin Poirier is extremely well-rounded. He can knock you out. He can submit you, or he can win by decision. Whereas I think Conor McGregor, if he's going to win this fight, it needs to be by knockout, and it needs to be probably in the first 2 rounds.
Do you think McGregor knows that, and he's going to be ultra aggressive early on here, trying to go for the knockout?
I do think to a degree, yeah. I mean, we've seen him in some other fights. I always think of like the Nate Diaz rematch, how he would always say in the first fight he was inefficient with his energy, and then the rematch he came out and he fought a very methodical game plan, went all 5 rounds, won a decision, which is very uncharacteristic from what we've come to know of Conor McGregor. It's usually, that first 8-minute burst, and most people are either out of there or he ends up losing the fight. So I don't think, the fundamentals of who Conor McGregor is as, a person and his attributes and stuff are going to go away. So I think for him, if he wants to win this fight and he has his best chance, it needs to be probably in the first 8-10 minutes. If he goes out there and wins beyond that mark, I think that will be one of the most impressive feats of his career, because we know Dustin Poirier gets stronger as the fight goes on. That's been proven time and time again. Whereas Conor McGregor, we've seen it time and time again that as the fights go on, Nate Diaz rematch aside, he wilts, and that's where his losses start to come.
Dustin Poirier, as good as he gets right now, what adjustments, if any, does he make from the second fight into this one? Can he stay with the same game plan and win?
I don't think he'll try to execute the exact same game plan. I mean, do I think he'll go out there and in the first 30 seconds to a minute flick a leg kick at Conor McGregor and see how he checks it, how he receives it compared to the first fight? He would be foolish not to, of course, but I think his team and himself have put together a strategy that, leg kicks, they probably think they can win the fight without throwing a single one. So if you're Dustin, I think the biggest piece of advice is just go in there and be the complete well-rounded fighter you are. I think the fact that he did get a takedown on Conor in the first minute of the last fight maybe just takes Conor McGregor's mind even 1% off the boxing or the leg kicks. That's to Dustin's advantage. So you want to go out there, just be who you've proven to be, becoming one of the best lightweights on earth in Dustin Poirier, and mix up the striking, the grappling, the clinch work, and everything. And I think that'll really help buoy him to victory.
Our guest is senior reporter at MMA Junkie Mike Bohn, talking all things UFC 264. From a legacy standpoint, Mike, what's on the line for Conor McGregor on Saturday?
I think it's the fine line of, is he going to be considered, one of the most decorated fighters ever? Of course, we know about his rise, 2 division belts, all these massive pay-per-views, biggest star in the sport, et cetera, et cetera. Those are all incredible accolades, and all accolades 99% of MMA fighters would kill to have attached to their name. But is he in the conversation for the greatest fighters of all time? I personally wouldn't put him in my top 10 or top 15 of like the best fighters strictly on skills to ever compete in mixed martial arts. And I think a loss here kind of permanently takes him out of that equation. Still so many positive things you could say about him, but that would not be it in my opinion. And I think if he does win here, that puts him back on that trajectory. He gets a title shot. He can beat Charles Oliveira, reclaim that belt. Then you're talking about one of the greatest fighters to ever do this. Right now, I think Conor McGregor is just one of the more decorated guys. And I think if he wants to push his legacy over that hump and get included in that conversation with the best ever, he needs to win here. And I think a loss, back-to-back defeats for the first time, all those kind of things kind of takes him out there. I mean, still a great future for him. He can compete in all the big fights he wants to, but I think he's kind of removed from that narrative at that point.
Dustin Poirier could have, taken the fight with Oliveira for the lightweight championship, but he chose to give McGregor this rematch, this trilogy fight. Do you think that was the right move? Because obviously people have criticized him for fighting McGregor again when he just beat him.
Yeah, I mean, well, for him, I think maybe a lot of people don't know this because it hasn't been talked about a ton, but going into that last fight, there was a trilogy clause in the contract. So Dustin Poirier, in beating Conor McGregor last time, was basically at Conor McGregor's whim in doing this. So yes, maybe they had done some maneuvering. If he really wanted to fight for that belt, he could have done so, but he was pretty much locked into this trilogy fight from the moment he knocked out Conor McGregor, unless Conor wanted to go a different direction and do something else. So he was at the whim of Conor's call. I don't think it was as much his as the narrative may point it out to be, but regardless of all that aside, it is the absolute right choice. Dustin Poirier rather is going to make more money in this fight than he's made in his entire life on a single night. It is unequivocally the right decision. He goes in and wins this fight against Conor, and he gets the title shot against Charles Oliveira anyways. And the fight is just that much bigger because however many millions of people are going to be tuning in to see this fight with Conor on Saturday. If Dustin wins, he gets the rub, he gets that clout, and then he goes into a title fight with a even bigger legion of followers who want to see him compete, and that just makes that title fight for him even bigger. So I think he could not have played this any better, whether it was entirely within his control or not. He's going to make all the money in the world. Conor McGregor is bigger than a UFC title fight right now at this point, and then he's going to get the title fight anyways if he wins. So win-win in my opinion. Mike
Bohn with us here, senior reporter at MMA Junkie. Press conference later today, Mike. Are you expecting classic McGregor to show up here? The last time these guys fought, McGregor had a very different tone. He did not do the typical Conor McGregor trash talk and try and get under Poirier's skin. But at least leading up to this press conference, he's been active on social media. He's been going after Dustin. Are we going to get a vintage Conor McGregor press conference later?
I do think so. And what exactly it'll look like, I don't know. I think Conor McGregor, even when we're talking about the quote-unquote vintage version of him, he brings something a little different each time. I don't think he's going to be, some of the stuff we saw in like the Khabib press conference, where he's like screaming, and he's needing to be held back by Dana and pointing in his face and all that. I think he might tone it down a little bit, but I think we're going to see a cold and calculated version of Conor. I think he's going to have some very sharp quotes, that sound violent to the ear and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think he's going to kind of like get too crazy in terms of like his physical demeanor and trying to get in Dustin's face and screaming. I think he's just going to be trying to pop off some really good quotes, and they'll be highly intense.
It's certainly better for Dana White's business if McGregor were to win. If he loses this fight, though, what are some fights that they can now make for McGregor if he's not going to be able to compete for that belt?
The Nate Diaz trilogy or Jorge Masvidal would be two that immediately come to mind off the top of your head. You could do a Max Holloway rematch. I know Holloway would be more than willing to go up to 155 to do that again. So there's tons of options for him coming off this fight, even if he gets knocked out in 5 seconds by Dustin Poirier. That's the thing. Conor McGregor has become bigger than titles, bigger than wins and losses, all that kind of stuff. I mean, obviously, people might have a damaged view of him if he loses 5 in a row by first round knockout or something. But as long as he goes in there and he seems, at least mentally in it and is able to, keep focus, all that kind of stuff, I think there's a long line of McGregor fights. But it does seem like the talk of the town is that if he does lose here, the timing would seemingly be perfect for that Nate Diaz or trilogy fight rather to happen again. So from one trilogy to another, perhaps.
Mike Bohn with us here. All right, as far as other fights on this card, there's some really good names that are on it. Give maybe the casual fight fan that's just going to be ordering this pay-per-view because of Conor, give them a preview of what they could expect in some of the other fights.
Oh, man, this is a great card, in my opinion. I mean, the one that really I'm most interested in, if you look at the undercard, is the prelim fight between Nico Price and Michel Pereira. Michel Pereira, if people haven't seen him, is one of the most unique fighters in all mixed martial arts. This guy goes in there, does backflips in the middle of the fight, jumps off the cage, does cartwheels, all this absolute craziness. And for his past few fights, he's kind of toned it down a little bit. He's become a more technical version of himself, but it seems like that was in correlation with there being no audience for his fight and having no crowd. This guy considers himself a showman and an entertainer, even first and foremost beyond being a technical fighter and that kind of stuff. So I think when there was no crowd, he didn't feel the pressure to kind of put on the spectacular show and do all these trademark moves. But now that we're back in front of a full audience, T-Mobile Arena, roughly 20,000 people, I think he's going to go back to his old self, and Nico Price could not be a better dance partner in that regard. He is a guy who's one of the great action fighters at welterweight as well. So I think you put these two in an octagon together, I can't imagine how it disappoints. And then, I think in terms of the main card, that Gilbert Burns, Stephen Thompson fight, massive stakes in the co-main event at welterweight. And then I'm always interested, even though it's not the fight we want to see Sean O'Malley in, to me, is still one of the most interesting prospects in the entire sport. His striking is such a treat to watch, how technical he is in there. So I think in terms of the pay-per-view opener, Sean O'Malley is probably going to set the tone in a pretty spectacular way.
Sean O'Malley is the guy that, I've had Dana White on the show before, and he always talks about him as the guy that could be a star in the sport. Do we see a breakout performance here with all the eyes going to be on this pay-per-view?
Yes and no. I mean, I think for him, it's a good showcase fight, or at least it should be on paper. His original opponent got injured. He's got a short notice replacement that I think has a style-friendly matchup for him in terms of his ability to maybe do something spectacular on the feet. So yeah, if the casuals are kind of turning in and they're like, look at this guy with the crazy colorful hair and face tattoos, who has some of the most unique striking you've seen, and it's just a treat to watch, that might maybe attach them to wanting to follow his career. But Sean O'Malley winning this fight in spectacular fashion, to me, is the expectation. So anything less would almost be a disappointment, and he needs to go in there and do that. But, the opponent, all respect to Chris Montinho, is not the guy that's going to tell us anything more about Sean O'Malley's ceiling or where he can be in terms of being a champion or a superstar than we know sitting here talking right now.
Mike, let's wrap it up with a pick. Who do you have in the main event, McGregor or Poirier?
I'm picking Dustin Poirier. I do just think he's the more complete fighter. Conor McGregor, love to see the focus. I think as you're starting to see the interviews with him roll out this week, if you're a Conor McGregor supporter, you're seeing literally everything you could want to see out of this guy. I think it would be a big confidence booster. But I just do think Dustin Poirier is the more complete fighter, the more well-rounded guy. He has more tools in his arsenal, and I think he's going to go in there and fight his fight. He's going to have the confidence of knowing this man was laying on the canvas unconscious in front of me about 5.5 months ago. When it happened to me, it was 6.5 years ago. I'm not even close to that guy. He can only make so many changes. I think if you're Dustin Poirier, you're going into this fight incredibly confident, and I do believe he'll deliver.
Mike, thanks so much for the time this morning. Appreciate you hopping on with us, and it should be incredible. Can't wait to watch it all unfold Saturday night.
It's going to be awesome. Thank you so much for the time.
Mike Bohn with us there on our progressive guest line. You can follow him on Twitter at Mike Bohn, Bohn. MMA. So it's at Mike Bohn, MMA, senior reporter at both MMA Junkie and Rolling Stone magazine. He joined us on our Progressive guest line, where if you use Progressive, you save over $750 on average. We will take a quick break. Be right back. Jake Asman with you. Stanley Cup final. It went to Tampa Bay. We'll react to all that next here on Sports Map Radio.
Pushing the odds with Matt Perrault.
Jeremy Roenick joining us here.